Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. So the question has come down, should I buy an old plane and restore it or a new one that's ready to go? Well, let's take a closer look at this. As with any topic in woodworking, it's rarely that it's Boolean. Should I buy A or should I buy B? It's usually should I buy A or B or C or D or E or AA, and the lists can be rather extensive. Today I want to mostly focus on the difference between new and old and what you should be looking for between the two. I'm going to kind of break it down into 5 different categories. Number 1, you've got the new plane of a decent quality, really good plane. You get this out of the box, you sharpen it, and it's good to go. This is the plane that is phenomenal, but it's going to cost you. Number 2, you have the new plane that is functional. It's going to require a little bit of finagling, and it might take a little bit of work to get going, but once you do, you'll have a really nice working plane, but it's going to cost you a little bit more because it is new. Then we get into the old planes. You can buy a restored old plane that is ready to go. And most of the time when you get that, it's going to be sharpened, it's going to be ready, you can pull it out of the box and go zip in a beautiful plane. Great way to learn. Usually going to be right about the same price as a decent quality new, but on the cheaper end. Then you can get the one that, yeah, it's going to need a little bit of work. This will become a good user, but it's not pretty. It's got some rust issues, may have a little bit of cracking here and there. The iron needs some work, but once you do it, it's going to work well for you. And then you have the old cheap. Most of the time I'm going to say stay away from these. They're planes that were manufactured very inexpensively and they need a lot of work. So basically you're getting a cheaper plane that needs a lot of work to begin with, but it's going to need even more work because it's covered in rust. As with all of these options, it's going to come down to money. And that's going to be different for every person out there. Some people have a decent amount of money and they're willing to spend some money on something that's good. Others may have a lot of money, but they want something that's a little older. They want something with a mystique to it. And so different strokes are going to want different folks. Or is that how the saying goes? For the most part, with antique tools or with new tools, you're going to get what you pay for. Especially with new tools, the price is generally pretty close to the quality you're going to be getting. If the plane is under $100, it's generally considered something that's going to take a little bit of work to get up and going. If it's under $50, you're probably going to need to put a good bit of work in it to get it up and going. But once you do, most of the time, a newer plane will work, even if it's something that's going to take a lot. When you start getting into the high-end planes, you're going to get something that not only works pretty well right off the bat, but number 2, you're paying for fit and finish. Fit and finish is how does it feel in my hand? And oftentimes, when working with a tool, how it feels in your hand will affect how well you use it and will affect your skill. And so having something that is comfortable and feels good can be really rewarding. And you're not going to be getting that with the cheaper new planes. With the antiques, you're often going to get planes that have a decent fit and finish. They actually feel really good, but the finish may be, well, rusted. This plane is an old Craftsman, and it actually has a pretty decent fit and finish. Nice rounded handle, nice knob, but it's rusted, and it's pretty solid, but everything's there, and with a little bit of work, this could turn into a really good user that feels good in the hand, and you could do some great work with it. But a little bit of work is, well, time. And as they say, time is money. Generally, the more you spend, the better the plane you're going to get, and the less time you're going to be spending on getting it up and running. The less you spend, the more time you're going to be putting into it and getting it up and running. So let's set the scene. You're a newer woodworker, and you're looking at getting another plane. You want something that fits your style and the way you want to work and something that will be useful for you. Now, what will be best for you will not be best for the other person. So you have to ask yourself a few questions. Number 1, what is your skill level? The more skill you have, the less work it will take to restore an older plane. The less skill you have, the more work it will take. So if you're kind of new at this and you really don't know what sharp really feels like, then you may want to get something that's a little bit better, something that you're going to be spending less time working on so that you know what good actually feels like. But if your pocketbook isn't quite as deep and you're willing to learn by the school of hard knocks, then an older, cheaper plane that needs some work may be the way to go for you. If you want something new that just works, then I'd say go take a look at Rob Cosman. He's got a lot of great videos on that. If you want something old that has been restored and still works great and will be a great user for another 100 years, then go take a look at Paul Sellers. He has a lot of videos on how to just whip up a plane that doesn't need much work on it and get it up and running. If you want to get something new, but you don't want to spend a whole lot of money on it, go take a look at Rex Kruger. He has a series of videos where he actually buys things off of Amazon and gets them up and running. And you can do that. It's going to take a little bit of work at the beginning. The things don't come perfect from China, but you can get decent quality tools as long as you're willing to put a little bit of work into them. If the idea of rust and junk really pleases you, then you might want to take a look at some of my older videos, because I do a lot of restorations on making hunks of junk really work. And that's where my love is, because I like a tool that has a lot of history to it. I like something when you pick it up, there's an old woodworker who used to use this tool and he spent his life with it. And that kind of means a lot to me. When buying new, there's a whole series of different qualities you can get. In my book, the best plane that has ever been made, the most functional, versatile user plane, is the Veritas Custom. This thing is just, it's a remake of the hand plane. It is not a remake of a Stanley. It is not a few extra things added on. This is just a complete redo. A really, really cool plane with lots of bells and whistles, and I absolutely love them. If you want something that still has that old world feel, and you want it to work right out of the box, well then you're probably going to be looking for something like a Lee Nielsen. It's basically a remake of the Bedrock Stanley planes, and they do really well. They have made a few other adaptations, but it's basically a Bedrock plane. If you want to save a little bit of money though, then you can step down to something like a Wood River. And in that case, you're buying something that's a little bit cheaper made, maybe not quite the fit and finish of the Lee Nielsen or the Veritas, but it's a really good working plane and it will treat you well right out of the box. If you're willing to forego a little bit of that fit and finish, then you can step it down a little bit to like the Stanley Sweetheart. There's a few others in that range. And then you can come down into the cheaper quality planes. And I'm probably going to be doing a test here soon, actually comparing some of those sub 100 planes. The top of those in my book right now is the Tay Tools. Really decent plane for the money. It's going to take a little bit of work to get up and going, but not that much. And then you can start going on down until you get into the Amazon Basic and the Harbor Freight, where you're only spending a couple dozen bucks to buy one, but you're probably going to end up spending a lot of work to get it going, and you'll probably never get the fit and finish out of it. When it comes to antiques though, I don't like talking about brands, because pre-war, pretty much every brand out there made great users, because the people that were selling them to were using them as a livelihood, not a hobby. Even things like a Craftsman. A Craftsman plane nowadays is a Craftsman plane back then, this is actually a really good user. But as time went on, they got less and less and less, and this one was made in the 70s with plastic handles and other junk, and I could get this up and running. It's never going to have the fit and finish. It's always going to be an uncomfortable plane, and it's never going to quite stay in tune. It's always going to be slightly out of true and just a little annoying all the time. So in buying antiques, number one, make sure everything is there. But number two, look at its age. Pre-war, you're going to be really good. Any junk that was sold pre-war doesn't exist anymore. It's been culled out of the system. Post-war, up until about the 70s, you generally have pretty decent users. 70s and on, boat anchors. I do have a couple videos on what to look for when looking for an antique plane or a saw or chisel, and so you can kind of get an idea on what you want. A lot of those things are there. Rust rarely is an issue unless there's serious amount of pitting. Most of the time it's just aesthetics. It kind of comes down to the fit and feel. How much work do you want to put into it versus how much money are you willing to spend to have that work already done for you. If you want to buy a new plane, well, you generally know where to go get them because the sellers have websites. But if you want to buy an antique plane, then you start running into more issues. And one of the big questions is, where do I find antique tools? And for that, I actually have a whole website dedicated to finding antique tools, handtoolfinder.com. It is a website that I have a map of the entire world with every known location I know of to buy hand tools. And if you find something that's not on that map, please let me know. I'll add it on there. Underneath that, I have a list of online sellers who are trusted that collect and sell tools all around the world, and you will probably find sellers who are willing to ship to where you are or may actually be in your country. Underneath that, I have a collection of parts sellers. I also have a collection of collecting organizations like the MWTCA. They hold tool meets around the United States where they sell antique tools, one of the absolute best places to buy them. And if you're still not finding what you want, I have a video dedicated to finding tools where I actually go through some of the other sources, such as garage sales and what you should be looking for and what you shouldn't be looking for and how to get into that. There is lots of information out there, and I hope those sources will help you find an antique tool along the way. So in the end, new versus old, it kind of comes down to you. If you've got the money and you don't have the time, then look at something new. If you've got the time but not the money, then look at something old that needs a little bit of work. If you're a little bit in between, well then find something in between. There are lots of great people out there restoring tools and selling them ready to go. There are cheaper new tools that don't take a whole lot to get going, and you can find something in that balance. It kind of comes down to your personality. For me, I'm very, very stubborn, and I didn't have a whole lot of money when I was first getting into tools. And so that meant I learned very, very well from the school of hard knocks. I bought something that was junky, needed a lot of work, and I worked on it, and I got it up, and it was working okay, and I learned a little bit more, and I working a little bit better, and it worked a little bit more, and I kind of went back and forth on actually learning how to get this stupid thing working. But eventually, through the school of hard knocks, I learned, and I had a really good, well-working tool. But that means I had to put a lot of time into it. And for a lot of people, time is money, and getting something new is well worth it. So I hope this answered a few questions for you. Yeah, it's one of those things that's very personal, and I really can't say buying new is better than old is better than new, because everyone's a little bit different. And depending upon who you are and what you do and what your money is and how much time you have and what you want to put into it and how stubborn you are, different tools are going to work well for different people. And that's what makes woodworking so much fun, because there is no right or wrong way to do it. As long as you're doing it safely, have some fun, experiment, try something. Be willing to realize, maybe this wasn't the best choice, maybe I'll go with that next time. And you learn a little bit about who you are and what you do and what works well for you. So I hope this information helps you. If there is something I can help you out with more, let me know in the comments down below. And also hitting that like, share, subscribe, putting comments down below, that does help out the channel. Thank you for that. I read through all the comments and I answer as many as I can get to. So if you have something specific in there, go ahead and throw it in or drop me an email. I'll try and get to whatever I can. I hope you like that. If you do want to help out a little bit farther, there's also a bunch of people scrolling over here on the side. They are the patrons on Patreon. And without patrons and members here on the channel, people supporting this channel financially, we wouldn't be here. So thank you for that. We are completely sponsored by you, the viewer, rather than having Stanley sponsoring the channel. I get to say what I want to say rather than what Stanley wants me to say. So I hope you like that. If you do have any questions, comments, snide remarks, throw those down below. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Generation X looks at the boomers and says, oh, we're better than you. And boomers say, yeah, you wish. And then millennials come in and say, oh, come on, guys, get together. We're all great. But we do know that I'm best.